Good afternoon to all, dear ambassadors, your excellencies, and dear members of the diplomatic missions of European and Asian countries, and dear members of Portuguese and foreign institutions, dear professors, students, dear participants. It is indeed my great pleasure to welcome you all in this webinar on advancing ASEAN-EU partnership. This event was co-organized by Instituto do Oriente, the ASEAN Committee in Lisbon, and the Portuguese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And as I said, it is my pleasure to host this event that addresses a very timely topic, in particular in the context of the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. Just a brief note to let you know that the webinar will be recorded and will be made available later through the Instituto do Oriente's website and other social media. I would just like to request the audience to mute their audio during the event, and in case you'd like to pose any questions at the end, I would suggest you to write them down in the chat button and, if possible, direct it to me, and then I will try and condense them and redirect them to the speakers. Without further delay, I will give the floor to Professor Nuno Canas Mendes. Professor Canas Mendes is an associate professor at the Institute for Social and Political Sciences of the University of Lisbon, and professor is also the president of Instituto do Oriente since 2018. Professor Nuno Canas Mendes.
Thank you, Mr. Andrea Valente. Excellencies, Ambassador of the Republic of Philippines, Cilia Ana Feria, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Thailand, Krongkanit Rakcharoen, Chargé d'Affaires ad interim of the Embassy of Indonesia, Ajeng Widianti, Rita Sampaio de Araújo, Deputy Coordinator in the Portuguese Presidency Unit, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Henrique Sousa de Azevedo from the Department for European External Relations and Enlargement, ambassadors, excellencies, and diplomatic representatives, distinguished guests and attendants. It is an honor to participate in this webinar on advancing ASEAN-European partnership, organized in collaboration with ASEAN Committee in Lisbon, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Instituto do Oriente, a research unit who belongs to the University of Lisbon. COVID-19 global crisis underlined the need to intensify cooperation and communication between the European Union and ASEAN to reflect on common problems and challenges. Additionally, Portugal, presently chairing the European Union, is responsible for a greater commitment to reinforce the political, economic, trade, and cultural relations with ASEAN. In these circumstances, this webinar is an excellent opportunity of sharing viewpoints and to discuss various dimensions, such as the 43 years of ASEAN-European Union dialogue or the perspectives on reinforcing this dialogue, and of course the unavoidable reflection on challenges to both entities during this COVID-19 crisis. It is also a motive of joy to have the presence and participation of the diplomatic representatives of Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia together with two distinguished Portuguese diplomats, reinforcing as well the importance of an open dialogue between diplomats and academics, students, and civil society. I would like to express my gratitude to the panelists who enthusiastically proposed to share their knowledge with us. Let me say a few words to present the Instituto do Oriente. It was founded in 1989 with a multidisciplinary approach from international relations to anthropology. The fact that in the transition of the 20th century to the 21st century, two former Portuguese colonies, Macau and Timor, changed its political status was an immediate reason for research. This opened a door to develop Asian studies with a special focus on Portuguese involvement and heritage in Asia on a contemporary perspective. A small number of academics were aware of the growing assertiveness of Asia in international relations from a political, economic, and social point of view, and this was the seed to the development of research directed to several regions in Asia, from China and Southeast Asia to Central Asia and Middle East. Asian region as well is on the top of Instituto do Oriente research priorities, and recently we have participated in an Horizon 2020 project on political, economic, social, and identity dimensions of Southeast Asia. This project, whose acronym CRISEA means Competing Regional Integrations in Southeast Asia, is a consortium of European and Southeast Asian universities and gathered several researchers from both sides. This webinar will certainly contribute to enrich opinions, views, and analysis on ASEAN-European Union relations. And I will pass right now the floor to Professor Andrea Valente. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Professor Canasmientos, for your opening remarks. And I'm very pleased to welcome Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of the Philippines to Portugal, Ambassador Celia Feria has been ambassador here in Lisbon since June 2017, and she has the concurrent jurisdiction over the Republic of Angola, Cabo Verde, Guinea-Bissau, São Tomé and Príncipe also. Previously, Ambassador has had various positions within the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs, and she has also been posted in Madrid, in Paris, and Brasilia. Madam Ambassador, I know it is an impossible task to try to address the 43 years of partnership between ASEAN and the EU in 10 minutes. However, Madam Ambassador, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will try and I'm also challenged have a technical challenge here at the embassy. So aside from the time challenge, here goes. So good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, was established in 1967 as an intergovernmental grouping by its 5 founding members. That's Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, with the signing of the ASEAN Declaration, which we also know as the Bangkok Declaration. ASEAN was founded to promote peace and stability in Southeast Asia. It expanded to include Brunei Darussalam in 1984, Vietnam in 1995, Lao PDR in Myanmar in 1997, and Cambodia in 1999. The motto of the organization is one vision, one identity, one community. Now, the aims of ASEAN were to enhance relations within the group, to accelerate the economic growth, social progress, and cultural development of the region through multilateral cooperation, as well as the all-important goal of promoting regional peace and stability under the ambit of collective security. On 31st December 2015, the ASEAN community was launched as a community anchored on 3 community pillars, basically political security, economic community, social cultural community. Now, the ASEAN community encapsulates ASEAN's resilience and dynamism and shows how far and how well the ASEAN member states have achieved in coming together as one community since 1967. And today, ASEAN has grown into a vibrant and increasingly integrated economic region with an increasingly stronger socio-cultural community, and it's a significant force in East Asia's regional political security and economic relations. Now, to further understand ASEAN as a regional organization, Let me present it by comparing it with the European Union, by looking at the similarities and differences between these two regional organizations. And to do this, I will refer to a wonderful article written by the esteemed Singaporean diplomat, Ambassador Tommy Ko, and he explains it this way. Now, the EU is often referred to as the most successful regional organization in the world, while ASEAN is referred to as the second most successful regional organization. Now, Ambassador Ko lays out more similarities. Both are regional organization and with legal personalities. The EU has 27, while ASEAN has 10 members, with more knocking at its doors. Both were founded to promote peace, the EU after 2 disastrous world wars, and to prevent the recurrence of war in Europe by institutionalizing peace through economic integration. ASEAN was founded to create a peaceful environment in Southeast Asia so that ASEAN countries could focus on their energies on economic development. Now, both also seek to integrate the economies of their member states into a single market and production platform. But for the EU, you have freedom of movement, goods, services, and capital, and labor. But in ASEAN, the movement of labor still isn't free. Another similarity is the commitment to human rights. The EU has a Charter of Fundamental Rights, and ASEAN has a Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, which is to promote and protect human rights through regional cooperation. Now, you and EU, you have a European Court of Justice, but ASEAN does not. Now, both ASEAN and EU have concluded many free trade agreements or comprehensive economic partnership agreements with other countries. The EU has concluded FTAs with 38 countries, including 2 ASEANs, and is under negotiation with other ASEAN countries like the Philippines and Indonesia. ASEAN has FTAs with Australia and New Zealand, China, India, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong. And just recently, we signed into RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which accounts for 30% of total global trade, actually bigger than that of the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement and the EU itself. A sixth similarity is that both ASEAN and EU hold regular political economic dialogues with important external partners. EU holds annual summits with its strategic partners. ASEAN holds annual summits with its 10 dialogue partners, namely Australia, Canada, China, Japan, India, Republic of Korea, New Zealand, the Russian Federation, the United States, and the European Union as well as with the United Nations. Then we have the differences. Ambassador Ko continues and says, ASEAN is an intergovernmental organization and that the EU is a supranational organization. The EU, you have a common currency, ASEAN, we don't. EU has a parliament, ASEAN does not. EU has a powerful secretariat called the European Commission, and ASEAN, we have a smaller secretariat housed in Jakarta. In terms of decision-making, EU can decide by taking votes. In ASEAN, we take all our decisions by consensus. And EU, you have 23 official languages. ASEAN uses English as its sole medium for meetings and communication. Now with the various similarities and differences properly defined between ASEAN and EU, we can now focus on the evolving relationship between these 2 regional organizations. And for this portion, I'll use information and make reference to an article on ASEAN-EU relations by Dr. Yao Lau Hui of the EU Center in Singapore. From a historical perspective, ASEAN's relations with EU can be traced back to 1972, when ASEAN, seeing the potential of the European market for its products, began an informal dialogue with what was then the European Community, with the objective of achieving market access into the region. In 1977, the European Community became one of ASEAN's official dialogue partners. And so this paved the way for holding of the first ASEAN-EC ministerial meeting in Brussels, which actually further propelled the relations between both regional organizations. In 1980, in Kuala Lumpur, the ASEAN-EC Cooperation Agreement was signed, which provided a legal and institutional framework to develop interregional ties, which not only focus on economic cooperation and development, but also extending most favored nation treatment to the contracting parties. Although admittedly at this time, ASEAN wasn't quite a priority for the EC's hierarchy of priority of relations. And so it was a pretty low-key relationship which continued throughout the 1980s. Then in 1991, the Maastricht Treaty transformed the European Community into the European Union, which became not only an economic powerhouse, but also a political actor with its own common foreign and security policy. In 1994, the EU's new Asia strategy was developed, wherein EU-ASEAN relations became a cornerstone of its dialogue within the broader ASEAN-Asian region. In 2003, EU reevaluated its relations with ASEAN with a more pragmatic approach by addressing international terrorism and developing economic relations, both bilaterally and at an interregional level. In 2006, EU identified ASEAN as one of its priority regions for EU's trade and investment. And the year after, ASEAN and EU began the free trade agreement talks, which are temporarily suspended after 6 rounds of negotiations. Then in May of 2015, the EU issued a joint communication on its relation with ASEAN entitled "The EU and ASEAN, a Partnership with a Strategic Purpose," which recognized that ASEAN is at the heart of the efforts to build a more robust regional security order in the wider Asia Pacific. Then in December 2020, 2 months ago, ASEAN and EU agreed to upgrade the relationship to a strategic partnership which foresees the establishment of more cooperative agreements on a wide range of issues, including the economy, ASEAN integration, COVID-19 responses, sustainable development, maritime cooperation, and cybersecurity. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the 3 pillars of ASEAN communities. These are the engagements of ASEAN with EU in the 3 pillars of the ASEAN community. Under the political security cooperation, ASEAN and EU have become strategic partners, like I said, in December of 2020, with a commitment to regular summits at the leaders level. The main areas of this strategic partnership under the political security pillar have been geared towards preserving peace and stability. Now, ASEAN collaboration with EU spans traditional and non-traditional security challenges, which include cybersecurity, combating transnational crime, border management, countering terrorism, addressing the rise of radicalization, violent extremism, and maritime security. Another important mechanism that the EU uses to strengthen its security cooperation with ASEAN is through the ASEAN Regional Forum, where it has contributed in many ARF activities and workshops covering disaster relief, counterterrorism, transnational crimes, maritime security, and energy security. Now, under the economic cooperation, ASEAN and EU continues to have robust trade relations. The EU is the 3rd largest foreign investor in ASEAN, and ASEAN is the region's, EU is the 3rd largest foreign investor in ASEAN and is the region's 3rd largest trading partner. In 2019, EU's investment in ASEAN totaled $16.2 billion, and total trade between both regions stood at $280 billion. Now, the high point of any economic relation between any 2 regions is a free trade agreement. So discussions on the framework of the ASEAN FTA, like I said, have been on hold since 2017. However, there are significant developments in bilateral FTAs between the EU and certain ASEAN member states. And basically these bilateral FTAs are the essential building blocks towards a future region-to-region FTA. Other ASEAN-EU economic collaboration include sustainable food production and resilient agriculture practices, sharing of best practices and experience on supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises, and the digital economy, support to ASEAN's connectivity master plan, among many others. Now, in the sociocultural pillar, cooperation, ASEAN and EU relations have been strongly defined through people-to-people programs towards sustainable development, where EU development cooperation has greatly supported ASEAN's commitment to improving the living standard in the region. So ASEAN continues to welcome EU support in aspects including climate change, disaster management, biodiversity conservation, sustainable development, gender equality and empowerment, youth exchange, engagement and student exchanges, sports exchanges, migration and education. In short, ASEAN cooperation does focus on the green agenda, the digital economy and connectivity, which is kind of what the Portuguese presidency wants to focus on. Now, in conclusion, I know I rushed this, but I hope that I've been able to provide you with an overview of ASEAN-EU relations, which started really 43 years ago when the then European community became a dialogue partner of ASEAN. So we have seen how ASEAN and the EU are good examples of regional integration and multilateralism. Although they have their similarities and differences, we saw how the relationship between the two has matured to a partnership where cooperation is based on joint planning, decisions, and implementation. Now, with the establishment of the strategic partnership between EU and ASEAN, more areas of cooperation will be created and expanded in a new chapter in the long-standing relationship between ASEAN and EU. Thank you.
No, we thank you, Madam Ambassador, for this mission impossible, right, of summarizing these more than 4 decades of relations, the similarities, the differences, the prospects of this strategic partnership. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. And we will now address these relations, but in light of the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. And to present us the European side, let me introduce you to Doutora Rita Sampaio de Araújo. Doutora Rita, she's a Portuguese diplomat, and she's been a diplomat since 2005. And she's also the Deputy Coordinator for the preparation of the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union since 2017. Doutora Rita, she was posted in Brussels from 2010 to 2017, where she was responsible for the EU-Asia relations at first within the Portuguese permanent representation of the European Union, and afterwards she dealt with the EU-Latin America and Caribbean relations within the European External Action Service. Doutora Rita, we look forward to hearing you and hearing your perspective on the European Union. Thank you, the floor is yours. Doutora Rita? Está ainda...
Está a funcionar? Estão a ouvir?
Sim, 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 agora sim.
Okay, sorry. I will restart. I was saying that I'm very honored to participate in this very interesting webinar. And before starting my intervention, I would just like to congratulate the previous presentation, and I was thinking while listening that it would have been very useful to have heard for this 10-minute presentation back into when I started working with EU-Asian relations, because this would have saved me a lot of time. It was an excellent presentation, and having said that, I will continue to my presentation. So I was thinking of dividing the presentation in 2 parts. One, pointing out the main target is of our Portuguese presidency during this semester to tackle the challenges of COVID, and the second, a short state of play, or where do we stand in the EU side. So regarding as you know, the presidency, our presidency started on the 1st of January under the motto "Time to Deliver," and it will last until the 30th of June. And our main challenge here was to deliver on a fair, green and digital recovery. We have identified 3 main priorities, which were designed to tackle all the COVID challenges. So first, to promote Europe's recovery, secondly, to implement the social pillar of the European Union, and third, to strengthen the European strategic autonomy. And these 3 main lines of actions are then declined in 5 priorities, which were most of them already in our program before COVID, but they were considered even more useful after COVID. And it's about creating resilient Europe, and the key word here is resilience. And this is the new one that we had to adapt to face COVID challenges: green Europe, social Europe, digital and global. So in the framework of resilient Europe, I would like to highlight three main issues. First is all the efforts we are doing to tackle the pandemic. So we, in these first 2 months we are almost arriving to the first 2 months of the presidency, we managed to coordinate the combat to health pandemia at all levels and put this high on the EU agenda. So ministries of health have met, ministries for foreign affairs have met, European Council met under our proposal. It's actually meeting today. And this managed for us to have some deliverables in the health area, which were some key documents where we, European Union, decided that we will have mutual recognition of the COVID texts on the one hand, recommendations on the free movement and travel restrictions within the EU, and as well as temporary restrictions on non-essential travels in the EU. Then the second main thing that we are looking, because we are addressing COVID challenges more in the purpose and an optimistic perspective of all we can do to combat these challenges, we are focusing on the economic recovery. And on this hand, I would like to also to signal two main developments, which are our Prime Minister signed recently the regulation that establishes the mechanism for recovery and resilience, and this will allow all member states to present their national recovery and resilience plans until the 30th of April. We are trying to lead by the example, so we were the first one of the first ones to present the project of a national plan, as well as to ratify the decision of own resources, and we are inviting all member states to do the same until the 1st of March. And we are also tackling all the cohesion funds, being the European Regional Development Fund, the Cohesion Fund, the European Social Fund, so that we have all the financial rules in place that will tackle, will promote jobs and will tackle unemployment. Then another thing that I think is quite positive is that we have also reinforced the EU civil protection mechanism. So we have now a new budget that will have 3 times more money than before in the previous period, and has a specific component to tackle civil protection in a framework of COVID and this sort of pandemic. And third, values. Resilience is also a question of values, and we have all these campaigns to combat misinformation, misleading or illegal content in general, but also in particular in all that has to do with vaccination process. Then on Green Europe, I think we all, the ones who follow social network, we see all these questions and doubts we have whether COVID is linked with the way we treat our planet. And so we thought that one of the priorities of our presidency in these 6 months is also to have Green Europe on the top of our priorities. And here there are 4 things we would like to do. One is to have the approval of the first European climate law that will set the legislation so that we achieve the objective of being carbon neutral by 2050. Then to have a more sustainable agriculture, and this is based on a strategy that's from farm to fork. Thirdly, it's about circular economy, and here it's about, specifically, we will tackle batteries. And fourth, as we are a maritime country, we will put a blue economy back in the EU agenda in these 6 months. Then third, digital Europe. This was already one of our priorities, but I think here is one that with COVID challenges is more and more important. And I think it's outstanding the fact that in less than in few months, we all had to learn so much, and we all had to work with digital innovation that allowed millions of people to work from home remotely. So here our main targets is to try in so much as possible to foster the digital skills, qualifications, requalifications, upskills, and to prepare citizens for the future of work. It's also to have the modernization of public administration and all the services in digital form. It's all about connectivity as well. In June, we will launch a symbolic event, which is the cable that will link Latin America with Europe, submarine cable, which is the Ella Link, which is about interconnectivity, but also a global Europe. And we are also tackling all that has to do with the digital rights. Then here we also think that innovation is essential, and I would just like to tackle 3 deliverables that we already had in these 2 months, which was we launched the Horizon Europe program, which has a component of Innovative Europe. Secondly, we also have a new mandate for the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, and we also had an adoption of a resolution for the European education area. And I think without all this investment in researchers, investigators, science and innovation, we would never have had a vaccine discovered in such a short period of time. Then regarding social Europe, this is one of our most important components, and it's about all the people that that are now facing huge difficulties. So we want in the 6 months to provide a legal framework for them, so that we don't leave anyone behind. So we will have the main event, which is the Porto Social Summit, which is about implementing the European Pillar of Social Rights. But we will also tackle legislative initiatives that go for the future of work, decent work, minimum wages, qualifications and skill, remote work, the balance between life and personal life and professional life. And then on global Europe, I would just like to highlight that we have now the External Action Service, but that is our intention to push for EU-Asia relations. And one of the key events we will have will be Prime Minister Modi, who will come to Porto for a high-level meeting with all heads of state and government. And briefly for the state of play of COVID and trying always to have a bright side, because it's for the rest we have the reality. I think the main challenges here is to strike a balance between fighting COVID and keeping Schengen alive, keeping the borders, keeping the free movement of goods, the free movement of people, especially those essential workers and those cross-border workers and the health workers, and everything that has to deal with essential goods. And at the same time, fighting these all variants that are very worrying, and to have always in mind that this is an unprecedented challenge, and the vaccination campaign will be very difficult. And there, I think the Commission has managed to do a very impressive job, not only by the early acquisition of vaccines and having all these contracts with the pharmaceuticals that will allow all member states to be on equal footing, but also that we have advanced in health policy in the last months more than in the last decade, I would say. And not only all we've done so far, but also that all the things we are looking to do. So we will revise the mandates of the European Centre for Disease Prevention and the European Medical Agency. There is this idea of a new health emergency and preparedness and response authority. There is this new task force with Commissioner for Internal Markets and Health, which will try to increase the capacity of increase the production of vaccines. And we will have this project, the ERA project, that it's about 5 things, and I'm almost finishing, which is about genomic sequencing, to try to adapt as fast as possible the vaccines to the viral mutations, to have a network of clinical trials, to accelerate the procedures of approval of vaccines, and to accelerate the mass production. And last remark, the leaving no one behind that I already meant, it's about having the moral commitment to help also third countries. So throughout Team Europe, all member states are trying to commit to share part of the vaccines that they will dispose with third countries. In our case, Portugal our Prime Minister has announced yesterday the intention to share 5% of the vaccines we will receive with East Timor and with African-speaking countries. And this is also the same with most member states, with the idea through Team Europe to tackle specifically our closest neighborhoods, the southern neighborhood and the eastern neighborhoods, as well as Africa. And I hope I didn't speak too much, and I'm available for questions afterwards. Many thanks.
No, you did not, Dra. Rita, and thank you. Thank you very much for presenting us with the European Union challenges, in particular the ones facing the COVID-19 crisis. And we will now focus on the ASEAN challenges. And for that purpose, I would like to thank the interim chargé d'affaires of the Indonesia Embassy, Mrs. Ajeng Widiantri. And besides being posted here in Lisbon at the moment, Mrs. Ajeng is the head of information, social and cultural affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Mrs. Ajeng, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dear participants of the webinar. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. Today, we would like to discuss about the challenges facing the ASEAN region, but we'll be highlighting on how ASEAN achieved the post-economic recovery. By late March 2020, all member states of ASEAN had been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Since each ASEAN member state confirmed its first case, national prevention and control strategies were launched to contain the outbreak. Public health advisories such as the promotion of frequent hand washing, appropriate use of masks, proper way of coughing and sneezing, and other ways of personal hygiene and sanitation, as well as physical distancing, also introduced. Here you can see the curve of the confirmed COVID-19 cases reported in ASEAN region as of February 21st, 2021. Here you can see, unfortunately, Indonesia reached the highest confirmed COVID-19 cases, which reached of 1,278,000 new cases, confirmed cases, whereas Lao PDR is recorded the lowest number of confirmed COVID-19 cases. As I agreed with the Ms. Rita Araujo saying that it is also ASEAN also we need to strike the balance between tackling COVID as well as stay committed in economic recovery. First of all, in the spirit of cohesive and responsive of ASEAN, ASEAN will remain united and vigilant in fighting against COVID-19. Realizing that no country can overcome pandemic issue alone, ASEAN seeks support and assistance as well as cooperation with the international community, including the international organizations such as WHO, as well as ASEAN's external partners towards enhancing collective pandemic preparedness and response. At this situation, ASEAN is remain committed as well to keep markets open for trade and investment, as well as to ensure food security and strengthening for resiliency for post-COVID-19 pandemic and sustainability of regional supply chains, especially for food, medicines, medical and essential supplies. Amidst the pandemic of COVID-19, ASEAN managed to proceed with important negotiations such as completion of substantive negotiation and finally signing the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. This demonstrates a strong commitment to support economic recovery and region's resilience through inclusive and sustainable post-pandemic economy recovery process. In strengthening the ASEAN-EU connectivity, the two regions reaffirm their commitment to an expeditious conclusion with the ASEAN-EU Comprehensive Air Transport Agreement. This would be the first substantive aviation agreement between two major regional groupings. ASEAN announced the efforts to recover the impacts of COVID-19 and develop a comprehensive recovery framework that is robust, holistic, inclusive, gender responsive, and science-based. These collective efforts are, first of all, is the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. This fund shall serve as a pool of financial resources to provide support to ASEAN member states in the detection, control, and prevention of COVID-19's transmission. The fund shall be made equally accessible to all ASEAN member states for the purpose of, among others, procuring necessary medical supplies and equipment that are effective, safe to use, accessible, and affordable. This fund shall be managed by the ASEAN Secretariat and in accordance with the rules and procedures. The second one is the ASEAN Strategic Framework on Public Health Emergency. This strategic framework will be the core document that guides ASEAN as an initiative for public health emergency that includes the generic standard operating procedures for the multi-hazards public health emergency responses. The third one is the ASEAN Regional Reserve on Medical Supplies, which would focus on strengthening the region's capacity and resilience by making the availability of medical supplies to be distributed during this public health emergency to all ASEAN member states. The fourth one is the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, which serves as the consolidated strategy for ASEAN with the goal to encourage development of a post-pandemic recovery plan. This framework articulates holistically the broad strategies of how ASEAN intends to recover from the pandemic, starting from reopening, recovery, and to emerge more resilient and stronger. The fifth one, the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergency, which would serve as a center of excellence and regional resources hub to strengthen ASEAN regional's capabilities to prepare, prevent, detect, and respond to public health emergency and emerging diseases. And lastly, ASEAN Travel Corridor Arrangement Framework, which is to facilitate essential business travel among ASEAN member states by applying health protocol measures with the objective to facilitate movements of essential business travelers in ensuring the continuous economic activities among ASEAN member states. In the context of EU-ASEAN relations, during the 23rd ASEAN-EU ministerial meeting on the 1st of December 2020, the two regions recognized the unprecedented impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. ASEAN-EU encouraged greater cooperation in strengthening both regions' preparedness for and capacity to respond to the current and future public health crisis. EU has assisted ASEAN with the Team Europe package of over 800 million euro to combat the spread of COVID-19 and mitigate its impact in ASEAN, as well as the EU support program for the Southeast Asia Health Pandemic Response and Preparedness of 20 million euros. ASEAN-EU also invited both experts to launch a dialogue on COVID-19 vaccines and look forward to the outcomes of the ASEAN-EU expert dialogue on vaccine security. The two regions expressed strong support for vaccine multilateralism and together ensuring fair, equitable, and affordable access to safe and effective vaccine as global public goods. EU also contribute of 500 million euro in grants and guaranteed loans to support the multilateral COVAX facility to accelerate and scale up development and manufacturing of a global supply of vaccines. ASEAN will continue to encourage the EU to support ASEAN's pandemic response and recovery efforts, including the ASEAN COVID-19 Response Fund, the Regional Reserve of Medical Supplies, and the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. Discussion between the two regions remain ongoing to take forward cooperation to combat pandemic, facilitate robust recovery, and enhance long-term resilience and sustainability through supporting the implementation of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. Again, here, I would like to highlight that ASEAN will remain committed in keeping the ASEAN region as an attractive investment destination, especially when ASEAN recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, and as well as to underscore the importance of enhancing facilitation of investment into ASEAN in the post-COVID-19 new normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jeng, for sharing this presentation on the ASEAN challenges. Now, after going through the historical background and also the present challenges, I think it's now the moment to think about the way forward and to think about how can ASEAN and the EU strengthen their relations. And for this purpose, I would like to firstly introduce Mr. Henrique Sousa de Azevedo, who is a Portuguese career diplomat. He is currently following the EU external relations with Asia, including obviously ASEAN. Previously, Dr. Henrique worked in the field of development cooperation at the Portuguese Development Agency, Instituto Camões, and in the field of EU budgetary and macroeconomic affairs at the Portuguese Ministry of Finance. So I give you the floor, Dr. Henrique. Dr. Henrique will be talking about the Portuguese presidency. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. So first, I would like to start by thanking our hosts. I'm indeed very honored to be able to speak in this webinar. I would like to greet Professors Nuno Canas Mendes and Professor Andrea Valente at Instituto Oriente, also their excellencies, the ambassadors of the Kingdom of Thailand and the Republic of the Philippines, as well as the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim of the Embassy of Indonesia. So to start my short remarks, I would start by noting that both the EU and ASEAN share a broad agenda, and this agenda encompasses a commitment to multilateralism, to free trade, to sustainable development, as well as to strengthening cooperation towards addressing global challenges. And in the recent past, this idea of shared priorities was signaled many times over, and indeed at different levels, at senior officials meetings, EU-Asian summits, post-summit conferences. And so the announcement of a strategic partnership during last December's ministerial meeting opened a new chapter in EU-Asian relations, and is indeed very much welcomed by Portugal. Our view is that we hope it will form the basis for further enhancing cooperation across many fields, as well as contribute to ASEAN's objectives of strengthening its role in promoting regional stability. So at this point, even though the topic at hand, the topic being discussed, is the way forward of strengthening EU-Asian dialogue relations, Portuguese presidency of EU perspective, it is important to clarify one legal aspect, and that is that under the Lisbon Treaty, and in particular Article 15 of the Lisbon Treaty, ensuring the external representation of the Union falls largely within the purview of the President of the European Council, and in specific cases, the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. And the reason I mention this is that, therefore, whilst the acting presidency of the Council may and indeed does encourage EU institutions towards the implementation, the full implementation of this partnership, concrete decisions will always have to take place at EU level in accordance with the treaty. That being said, I think that there are three key subjects that I would like to focus on, that Portugal feels are particularly relevant at this point in time, and that were indeed pointed out by and recalled by our Minister of Foreign Affairs during last December's ministerial meeting. And those three subjects are, firstly, connectivity, secondly, trade affairs, and thirdly, cooperation on science and technology. So to start, firstly, on connectivity. Connectivity is a priority for the European Union, as indeed it is set out in the Connecting Europe and Asia strategy. And we support efforts at building synergies with the Master Plan on Asian connectivity for 2025. The joint ministerial statement on connectivity that was adopted last December expresses both the need for practical cooperation and the clear benefits that can arise from it, notably in supporting a robust socio-economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. I would say that above all, our approach is that we support an approach based on the principles of fairness, transparency, sustainability that were agreed at ASEAN level, as well as a rules-based approach grounded on quality benchmarks, such as the G20 principles for quality infrastructure investment. And as noted in the ministerial statement, these principles should translate into an approach that, amongst other things, observes the principles of international law. And I would point out in particular the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, an approach that ensures vaccines are treated as global public goods, as well as promoting a level playing field, particularly on trade. And this brings me to my second subject after connectivity, which is trade. Now, trade is a long-standing issue, and I have to say that we would have hoped by now that the EU and ASEAN would have reached a region-to-region free trade agreement, since it is over a decade since we first discussed it. Unfortunately, that has not been the case, and it's unfortunate because it would send a strong signal of both our regions' commitment to bringing tangible benefits through economic integration and trade liberalization. Our point of view is that whilst valuing the existing bilateral agreements and between the EU and Asian members, we regard them as an intermediate step on which both parties can eventually build a regional FTA that will further mutually beneficial trade relations. And as was pointed out previously, we are at a point in time where we have a regional comprehensive economic partnership that covers approximately 1/3 of the world's GDP and population. And we think that it should provide further incentives towards seeking synergies that will unlock more and new opportunities. And thirdly, moving on to the third subject, which is cooperation on science and technology, I would point out that there are significant linkages between advances in these fields and succeeding in implementing our shared agenda on connectivity. So this ties into point one, as well in successfully addressing the coronavirus pandemic. And as noted in the ministerial statement, I would particularly recall the successful collaboration under the Asian Committee on Science, Technology and Innovation, as well as under the Asian Dialogue on Science and Technology, specifically to highlight new features linked to connectivity via supporting high performance computer online schools. So that's one good example of success. And lastly, I would note that if cooperation on science and technology, and indeed cooperation at large, can and does take place in the context of intra-Asian relations, as well as within Asian +6, then Europe is also a natural partner. So to conclude, I would say that it is for many reasons, and particularly those reasons I pointed out, that Portugal shares the Union's ambitions and continues to support the strengthening of EU-Asian relations. This new strategic partnership is a goal that the EU and Asian committed to 2 years ago, and we hope will contributing to harnessing the full potential of this relationship. And lastly, to conclude, we commemorate the 43rd years of EU-Asian dialogue relations, but we also look forward to commemorating the 45th anniversary of EU-Asian relations in 2022 and to the 24th ministerial meeting, which the EU is scheduled to host next year. So once again, thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions when you feel it's appropriate.
Thank you, Dr. Henrique Sousa de Azevedo. I'm sure the questions will come up. And finally, it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ambassador Krongkanit Trun, this is my best Thai pronunciation, though terrible. She's ambassador of the Kingdom of Thailand into Portugal since just last year. But interestingly, this is the second time the ambassador is posted here. The first time was about 20 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Apart from Portugal, Ambassador Krongkanit was posted in Vietnam, was posted in India, and more than once in China. Ambassador Krongkanit is also the current chairperson of the ASEAN Committee in Lisbon, and she will be the chairperson until June 2021. Her Excellency will present us with the ASEAN perspective on the way forward to strengthening ASEAN-EU relations. Thank you, Ambassador, Madam Ambassador.
Hello. Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Andrea Valent, for the introduction. And thank you, Dr. Henrik, for your presentation on EU's perspective. It is my pleasure to be here. My topic for today is the way forward of strengthening ASEAN-EU dialogue relations, which is a continuation of the previous topic, 43 years of relations of ASEAN-EU, presented by Ambassador Celia of the Philippines. In this presentation, I will show you ASEAN's thinking of how to manage and chart the course of its relations with the EU. As my dialogue has earlier mentioned, we commend and look forward to continue working with the EU under the Portuguese presidency on a wide range of issues of strategic importance, such as maritime security, cybersecurity, and connectivity as key areas identified in the current ASEAN-EU Plan of Action. However, what will be high on the agenda is how ASEAN and the EU will shape the future direction of our strategic partnership, whether there will be regular leaders forum or EU becoming member of other key ASEAN-led mechanisms, such as the East Asia Summit, so on and so forth. The elevation of the EU-ASEAN relations to strategic partnership marks a substantive change, not merely a revival of political commitment. Two sides need to cooperate to create an agenda of cooperation and tackle joint challenges. But one thing we know for sure is that the strengthening of ASEAN-EU relations in principle will continue to be driven by shared values and interests, a mutual desire to cooperate on addressing common challenges, and a commitment on both sides to the rules-based international order. Besides, we witness more cooperation from individual EU member states with ASEAN, as Germany, France, and Italy have signed up for new development partners of ASEAN. These valuable partnerships would contribute to fostering cooperation in many crucial areas that each country has expertise. Cooperation on health sector should also be high on the agenda. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the EU and ASEAN have intensified their cooperation in the fight against COVID-19. We are grateful that the EU has mobilized over 800 million euros through the Team Europe initiative to help ASEAN region to cope with the COVID-19 crisis, as well as many other activities, as Ms. Ajeng, my Indonesian colleague, has already mentioned. However, our cooperation and collective response to COVID-19 should be further enhanced, especially through the acquisition of vaccines as global public goods, so that they can be accessible to all at an affordable price. We are happy that experts from EU and ASEAN are getting together to design the cooperation on vaccine security. Still, there is more room for cooperation on the health sector. I wish to emphasize the importance of ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases, which will be established within this year. This center is an aspiration reflected by ASEAN leaders for improving ASEAN emergencies response on health issues. We believe that once established, the center will work actively with the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control in order to learn from the EU's experience on how to enhance intra-regional capacity building, skills transfers, and intra-public health system in the region. Moreover, ASEAN will continue to enhance cooperation on research and innovation through the EU's program Horizon Europe that allow researchers and innovators from other regions, including ASEAN, to attend advanced trainings, exchange programs, and scholarship programs. These are open opportunities to foster a shared culture of research and innovation across continents. As we are now seeing a light at the end of the tunnel with the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine, therefore, cooperation between EU and ASEAN to mitigate the adverse impact of COVID-19 should be another area to be emphasized because of the fact that the economic importance of ASEAN and the EU to the global community is prominent. The ASEAN region is currently the world's 5th largest economy, home to more than 640 million consumers, while the EU, combining all 27 member states, is the largest economy and the largest trading bloc in the world, with 500 million consumers. EU and ASEAN account for over 60% of the world's GDP. Our bilateral trade reached $280 billion in 2019. To mitigate adverse impact of COVID, we need to accelerate mechanisms of trade and investment facilities, work closely to keep markets open, and ensure continued flows of trade and investment. One important tool is to expedite the free trade agreements. Unfortunately, negotiations for a region-to-region trade and investment agreement between the EU and ASEAN launched in 2007 was suspended in 2009 as the EU decided to pursue bilateral trade agreements with individual ASEAN member states. To date, we are happy that the EU has finalized bilateral free trade agreements with Singapore and Vietnam, with Indonesia and the Philippines on the way, but we are hoping for more because we see that bilateral free trade agreements between the EU and ASEAN countries will serve as building blocks towards a future EU-ASEAN agreement, bringing together two of the world's largest economic areas with a combined market of more than 1 billion people. Secondly, as EU and ASEAN aim to accelerate digital transformation, both need to enhance digital cooperation in the key areas such as cybersecurity, e-commerce, and also digital infrastructure development. At this stage, we are happy to see that ASEAN and EU now undergo cooperation in developing an ASEAN Digital Index and capacity building programs under the Enhanced Regional EU-ASEAN Dialogue Instrument. Thirdly, ASEAN sees the merits of enhanced connectivity in ASEAN integration. ASEAN has its own master plan of ASEAN Connectivity 2025, and the EU has its strategy on connecting Europe and Asia. As connectivity lies at the center of the EU's approach in its strengthening relations with ASEAN, we are certain that EU strategy of connectivity complement ASEAN's master plan on connectivity to 2025. Therefore, it is time to start enhancing synergies between these connectivity initiatives and bring into action the ASEAN-EU Joint Ministerial Statement on Connectivity agreed by our ministers in the last ASEAN-EU ministerial meeting on the 1st of December last year. Among all the industries hit by COVID-19, it is undeniable that the aviation industry has been badly affected as we see the dramatic drop in demand for passenger air transport. We view that if ASEAN and the EU could finalize the comprehensive air transport agreement as soon as possible, it would be the first ever block-to-block air connectivity agreement between the two regions. Once travel and tourism are back on track, our two regions will benefit from this agreement enormously. Lastly, deeper public-private engagements are also a key to regional economic prosperity. We will encourage more activities between EU-ASEAN Business Council and the ASEAN Business Advisory Council. We will continue to support ASEAN-EU Business Summit and their interface dialogue with leaders. Another area that the EU and ASEAN should give priority to is sustainability and resilience. In 2019, the ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue has been established to promote research, capacity building on sustainable development, and serves as a platform for policy dialogue among ASEAN and between ASEAN and its external partners, including the EU. We are glad that ASEAN and the EU have made joint commitments towards inclusive sustainable development, including the pursuit of Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030. which is also in line with the agenda of Resilient Europe, Social Europe, Green Europe, and Digital Europe set as priorities of Portuguese Presidency 2021. ASEAN welcomed the EU's commitment to forging cooperation with the ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue. We look forward to concrete cooperation projects between the Center and the EU, focusing on recovery efforts from COVID-19, long-term resilience, and sustainability. This year, Thailand will host the third ASEAN-EU Dialogue on Sustainable Development, which is another platform for ASEAN and the EU to take forward our cooperation on sustainable development. Given the EU's advancement in circular economy under the European Green Deal, ASEAN looks forward to discussing with the EU on how to enhance our cooperation in promoting bio-circular green economic model to help ensure sustainable economic growth in ASEAN in the long term. We will continue our cooperation on environment and climate change. We will continue our discussion to strengthen cooperation on the shared regional and global challenges through a high-level dialogue on environment and climate change launched in Bangkok in 2019. We are grateful that the EU also supports ASEAN with the initiatives related to climate change, resilience and adaptation, environmental conservation, including protecting biodiversity and disaster preparedness and response, such as Smart Green ASEAN Cities and the integrated program enhancing capacity of the ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance on Disaster Management, as well as ASEAN Emergency Response Mechanisms. Another area that should not be overlooked is human security and human capital development, which is always at the center of ASEAN regional development. We encourage the EU to continue to improve connectivity in education and research with ASEAN. The cooperation focusing on people aims to build connected and inclusive societies which place priority on well-being and social welfare. Aligned with ASEAN's social, cultural, community blueprint with strong focus on human, EU development cooperation underpins ASEAN's commitment to improving living standards in the region. Last but not least, as EU and ASEAN are elevating our relations to a new phase, it is noteworthy to take into account that becoming strategic partners, we need to give importance to strategic trust and eliminate issues that could undermine it. Enhanced strategic trust would allow both to promote agenda of common interest, send strong signal to global community of bilateral commitment to bring tangible benefits and prosperity to their people and effectively tackle future multifaceted challenges. We believe that the working group on vegetable oil production recently launched could be our efficient platform to enhance mutual understanding and concretely integrate views towards palm oil issue over the challenges of sustainability from the EU and relevant ASEAN member states. This is one of strong commitments towards building trust, willingness to find solutions, and developing further cooperation in the area. Elevated strategic partnership does not only demonstrate a strong collaboration between ASEAN and EU, it also explains the relevance of regionalism and values inter-regional collaboration in this present time. Given the geopolitical uncertainties, ASEAN and EU should continue to strengthen regionalism and multilateralism. Multilateral rules-based system reiterate the importance and support free and open trade, which ultimately benefits regions and people. We should work for a more coordinated inter-regional position concretely. Lastly, we witnessed that some members of the EU, such as France, Germany, and Netherlands, have already devised their Indo-Pacific policy. It may be timely for the EU to come up with EU's own policy too, which would help add clarity and value to the EU's role in the large biogeographic region of Indian and Pacific Oceans combined. As ASEAN lies at the heart of the Indo-Pacific region, we wish to further enhance win-win cooperation on convergent interests with the EU, especially in areas identified in the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific launched in 2019. Looking at ASEAN and EU, we are different, but we also share some similarities and shared goals. Learning from each other, we are able to complement each other and ensure the prosperity of our regions and peoples. Before ending my presentation, on behalf of the ASEAN Committee in Lisbon, Portugal, I wish to express our appreciation to the Instituto do Oriente and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal for their support and contribution and for the success of today's webinar. I hope the audience have gained more understanding about our inter-regional relations, and we are pleased to answer the questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your brilliant presentation. And in fact, I thank all of the speakers for all the very insightful presentations. Well, given the time constraints, I would like to open the Q&A session. I'm not sure if there's any question here, but we did receive one question beforehand, which I will read. It is a question from a PhD student, Rui Gaspar, and his question refers to the, well, actually, departs from the contrasts in terms of attitude. He says that there is, contrarily to the Western world, the People's Republic of China does not impose any political and social conditions on financing other countries. Therefore, and this is the question, what can EU and ASEAN countries do to promote and create a more sustainable future in which all human beings' rights and freedoms are respected? A final comment perhaps from each of the speakers on this topic. Ambassador Celia, would you like to add something about this?
I don't think I quite understood that. That was a little bit too broad.
True. But the question is, what can the EU, ASEAN as a whole, I would imagine, what can they do to promote and create a more sustainable future, a more in which human rights and human freedoms are respected? This is the question.
Well, I think ASEAN and EU continue to engage each other, and with the strategic partnership agreement that we've reached, it's shown the maturity in that relationship. I think we've traced the 43 years of EU-ASEAN relationship, and it has grown. We have much to learn from ASEAN. I mean, I'm sorry, from EU, and we have in our different, through the years, in ASEAN engagements with EU, in the three pillars of ASEAN community, the political, security, economic, and sociocultural, it just shows the wide range of exchanges. Human rights is one of them. Although, you know, we in Asia have perhaps a different, well, it's not a different standard, but you know, it's the culture is different as well, no? So in Europe, we have in ASEAN, the difference that we have is that in ASEAN we have the HR, wherein we discuss human rights and the promotion of human rights in ASEAN, and perhaps in EU you have a different way of approaching human rights. But I think through the continuous exchanges, we will continue to learn from each other. It can only improve. I don't think we can, you know, we can't go back, you know. I think engagements are all, have been very positive, and we just keep improving on the previous relation. Any misunderstandings, we always find ways to mend whatever misunderstandings there are. But you know, ASEAN welcomes the opportunity to work with EU at every level, and I think a manifestation of this is the fact that our relationship has been upgraded to a strategic partnership.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Any other further comments? Ambassador Kromkanit, would you like to add anything? Or Mrs. Ajeng?
Yes, I agree with Ambassador Celia that we have a lot of opportunity to learn ahead, to learn from the EU, especially through the ASEAN-led mechanisms, with all of our dialogues, and even now with the strategic partnership that we are heading for, we can to me, I think that we could exchange views and best practices to have a sustainable relationship, which is built on mutual trust, mutual respects, and also the mutual benefits of our two regions and two blocks. I think we have a bright opportunity ahead with our relationships that is growing every day on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps from the Portuguese side, any further comment, Doutora Rita? You're still muted.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Total agreement with what it has been referred, and regarding human rights, especially in this pandemic and post-COVID, I would just like to signal that very recently, on the 22nd of February, the Council has adopted two conclusions. One on our policy for post-COVID-19 on human rights. And there we reiterate the commitment of EU with human rights in the context of COVID, and we recognize all the social economic impact, and that it has it created further inequalities and the inequalities that already existed, but it enhanced even more. And this was one of the conclusions we recently adopted in the Foreign Affairs Council. Sorry, and the second one were conclusions on the priorities of the EU for the UN forums on human rights, and it's also to tackle COVID-19. So these are two documents that are available both in our website and in the Council website if you need further information. And then it is true that the EU perspective on human rights is always trying to softly influence others to follow the same model. So we have this practice of inserting of our human rights clauses as conditionality in all agreements, in the political agreements. We have these rules of human rights dialogues with most important partners, and it is at the core of our project. So it's what we are.
In our DNA, right?
In our DNA, exactly.
Yes. And if you allow me, if you indulge me, I will use the prerogative of being the moderator to raise a final question. Mrs. Zheng, for instance, and also the Ambassador Celia have mentioned the issue of RCEP. And I would like to ask you, whoever would like to take the question, I would like to ask you, how do you see this this new partnership and in influencing the EU-ASEAN relations? What kind of impact do you foresee?
Okay, well, first of all, RCEP it's not a single market like you have in the EU. It's totally different. So, what it is actually the 10 ASEAN countries and the 5 countries with whom we have FTA. So we just put them all together. So that would be Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, and Korea. And basically, I think the benefits for that would be especially for European businesses that are already in the region, because then it would uniform certain rules of origin, shipping from one place to another. You know, it's going to be rules based. So it's not a thorough, comprehensive, it's not a single market, not at all, but it enhances the business atmosphere in the region. And the fact that, we mentioned that it encompasses 30% of the population. So that's a big market. So although it's, again, not a single market, but it's a beginning, and it's rules-based. So when it's rules-based, it's pro-business, and that's always good. And for players from the EU, I think it offers an opportunity, a bigger market. So I know it's new, it's still new. I know the EU is still reading into it and looking into the synergies, but it's a beginning. And we hope that more European businesses do settle in ASEAN and look at ASEAN as a region for investments.
It's an added platform, as you see it.
It's an yes, that's right.
Thank you. Mrs. Ajeng, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I totally agree with the Ambassador Celia. Well, basically what Ambassador mentioned about that RCEP has large potential opportunities for businesses. I mean, because it encompasses 15 countries that has a really big market for EU export, EU's market as well, and also a huge, it encompasses a huge population, which is also meaning it's a huge market for EU's export, what do you call it, destinations. As well as since, and also because it encompasses of 15 countries, so it's also, and not only a huge population and huge market for EU, but also the RCEP is much more developed in terms of competition, and because it encompasses a lot of issues, investment, trade and services, e-commerce, and intellectual property. So I think the RCEP will be not only the RCEP will be an excellent accelerator for strengthening interregional relation, not only between ASEAN and EU. So it could be an accelerator.
Accelerator. Thank you. Dr. Henrique, não sei se gostaria de acrescentar alguma coisa.
Thank you. Yes, on the regional comprehensive economic partnership, I would just like to note the High Representative Borrell's comments at the time RCEP was signed, noting, of course, RCEP's dimension covering 1/3 of the world's population and GDP, and also noting that the EU always welcomes rules-based multilateral economic integration, and once again reinforcing the importance of enhancing our engagement with ASEAN on trade, not only on trade, of course, but also on trade, and that right back then when it was announced, the EU's reaction was quite welcoming and positive, and of course we are following developments and hope the EU-Asian relations may become even stronger. That's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Thank you. I would like to thank you all once again, and I will, Professor Nuno Canas Mendes will give you some very final words, and from my side, once again, thank you very much for your very, very interesting and insightful presentations. Professor Nuno Canas Mendes.
Very much, Professor Andrea Valente, for your moderation. Excellencies, ambassadors, diplomats, participants, let me thank you for this webinar. It was a very good opportunity to discuss all these insightful and interesting topics regarding the dialogue between ASEAN and the European Union. So thank you very much.